Today is the 10-year anniversary of Guantanamo Bay opening its doors. Let's not forget that today, despite President Obama's promises, it remains open. Now let's go through a few figures. Overall, 779 men have been imprisoned in the facility since it opened in 2002. Today, there are still 171 detainees housed there. 89 of those have been cleared for release by the government, yet haven't been granted it. 46 have been deemed completely untriable. It's also the most expensive prison in the world, and it costs $800,000 per prisoner per year. Now, those are just the figures, but let's also talk about the damage in ethics and credibility and the reputation of the United States, and ask if we'll ever see a day when the prison really does close. Here to discuss with me is Andy Worthington, investigative journalist and author of The Guantanamo Files, the stories of the 759 detainees in America's Isle. All right, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You have been writing about this for quite some time. You've been trying to get Guantanamo Bay closed. Did you ever think that 10 years in it would still be open?
Well, it's funny because I really started this full-time about 6 years ago, and at the time I don't think any of us could really see an end to the Bush administration. You know, it appeared to be... The Bush administration was obviously under attack in the second term from people within the United States and abroad saying, you know, you've gone too far, this is outrageous, pull it back. And you could see it was starting to happen. But I don't think people knew. And then, of course, President Obama came along with his promises. And people thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this is going to turn it. Because he didn't make offhand promises about closing Guantanamo and repealing the Military Commissions Act and undoing the damage. He made very explicit statements and promises about it.
He signed an order for it.
And then he signed an order on his second day in office, yeah. And, you know, and so it seemed that it was realistic. And now we're in a position that I think was unimaginable at that time, which is that we're putting our heads together, those of us who care about these issues, struggling to understand how we can put the pressure on the president and on the other institutions in the United States to get a single prisoner released, even though, as you said in your introduction, there are 89 people there who the United States government says it doesn't want to hold. We can't get any of them out. How is that possible?
Well, you know, there you have to ask as well, because some would argue that maybe the president never really wanted to close Guantanamo Bay. A lot of what he's done is, of course, look to Congress, which has said barred them from transferring anybody onto U.S. soil. But maybe he wanted to close Guantanamo Bay. I don't know if you think he did or not, but he always believed in indefinite detention. He signed a formal order for indefinite detention. He said some of these people were untriable. So even if he had gotten his way, if he had moved it to Illinois, would that have made it any better?
No, moving it to Illinois would not necessarily have made it any better. I mean, it would have opened it up to new legal challenges, probably. But that didn't happen. I mean, I think he did want to close it. Maybe what he didn't understand was there are going to be issues about who these guys are and different questions are going to arise. And within the first few months, after he'd set up a task force of career officials and lawyers from across the government and the intelligence agencies to look, then they obviously started saying to him, oh, we've got these guys, they look dangerous, but the evidence, what are we going to do? And it all looked more complicated. But he didn't act swiftly. He inherited at least 60 prisoners from the Bush administration who'd been cleared for release. These are most of the guys that he then cleared for release. He could have started the ball in motion quickly when he came into office. Let's get people out of here. Let's really show that we want to close it.
Well, do you think
he delayed, and then Congress started mobilizing, you know, and the Republicans really started to realize, hey, we can play the fear card with this. We can be tougher than, we can portray him as weak.
Well, the fear card's been played all along with Guantanamo Bay, especially if you want to talk about the idea of civilian trials versus, you know, the military commissions. But now do you feel like the ball is rolling in the opposite direction? You have the NDAA that's been signed, and some people fear that maybe someone's going to get sent to Guantanamo again. That they've been, you know, they've been putting more money in to revamping the place.
Well, no, the biggest problem now with the NDAA is that lawmakers in the United States decided that it was appropriate to get together and to say, we demand that terrorist suspects allegedly connected with Al-Qaeda have to be held in military custody without charge or trial, and that this could include American citizens. They explicitly said that. That's really alarming. That fundamentally undermines the principles on which the United States was founded. I mean, it really is such a savage attack on what the United States is supposed to stand for. Now, whether it will be implemented or not, that's open to a lot of arguments. But the fact that they thought that was a good idea is alarming.
It's very alarming, but the thing
But
is...
it came from Guantanamo. That's the thing, is that people
but
have been...
American citizens haven't been all that vocal about Guantanamo Bay, nor about the NDAA. So are we at fault here in a way? You know, I'm very curious as to what Guantanamo Bay represents internationally for the rest of the world, and how they think of that as a mark on America's legacy.
Well, I mean, obviously around the world people haven't approved of it, although, you know, when it was first set up, other governments were helping the United States. They were perceiving a terrorist threat from radical Islamists. People were involved in it. I mean, my country, the UK, was probably the most closely involved in it. Other countries helped with intelligence, with rendition, with... People were involved in it. People turned against it because it was such a nightmare place, you know, a horrible place outside the law where torture was taking place. You know, the main issue is for Americans to understand what's happening. I think that it's Guantanamo, where foreigners were held, has been the indefinite detention without charge or trial of people. And the NDAA possibly suggests that it might be Americans. American people got upset about that provision because it was about Americans. They should have been upset 10 years ago. They should have, throughout that period, been upset that anybody was being held under those circumstances. That's been the problem, really.
And then maybe it never would have gotten that far. Andy, I have to wrap it up. Unfortunately, we're out of time. But thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.